It was a quiet evening. The kind of evening where the air feels heavy, like it knows a secret it isn't ready to share. Jonathan Roumie had just stepped off the set after a long day of filming The Chosen. His heart was restless. He couldn't explain it, but something had been stirring inside him for weeks. Maybe it was the weight of playing Jesus. Maybe it was the letters people kept sending, people whose lives had been changed after watching him bring those words to life. Or maybe, it was something deeper. Jonathan sat alone in his small living room that night, the soft glow of a single lamp flickering. The world outside was asleep. But his mind was wide awake. And in the stillness, a question rose inside him. One he had never asked before. Why only 33 years? Why had Jesus, God himself in human form, chosen to live such a short life? Why not 60, or 70, or 100? The thought wouldn't leave him alone. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and whispered into the emptiness, not expecting an answer. Jesus, why only 33? There was a pause, a silence so thick it felt like the room was holding its breath. And then, a voice. Soft, clear, but it wasn't from outside. It was from within. Jonathan, do you really want to know? His eyes flew open. He wasn't dreaming. He could feel the words as much as hear them, like they were alive. Yes, he whispered, almost afraid of what might come next. The voice spoke again, calm and steady, yet carrying a weight that made his chest tighten. Then listen, because this will not just answer your question. It will break your heart. Jonathan sat frozen, every nerve awake. The air in the room felt warmer, as though someone unseen had stepped into it. And suddenly, he wasn't in his apartment anymore. At least, it didn't feel like it. The walls, the floor, the flickering lamp, they all faded. He was standing on a dusty road, under a pale blue sky. Far ahead, a small group of men were laughing, walking together. And in the center of them, was him. Jesus. Not the way Jonathan had portrayed him on camera. Not the way paintings tried to capture him. This was different. This was real. He looked so ordinary. And yet, something about him pulled at Jonathan's soul like a tide he couldn't resist. Jesus turned. Their eyes met, and Jonathan felt like the whole world had gone silent just for this moment. Jesus smiled, a smile both gentle and sad. Walk with me, he said. Jonathan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. As they walked, the laughter of the other men faded into the distance. It was just the two of them now. Jonathan wanted to ask the question again, but something in Jesus' eyes told him to wait. Finally, after what felt like miles, Jesus stopped. He looked out at the horizon, where the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in gold and crimson. And then he spoke. Do you know why I came? Jonathan swallowed hard. To save us. Jesus nodded slowly. Yes, to save, to heal, to show the love of the Father. But there's more, Jonathan. More than most people understand. Jonathan's heart pounded. What do you mean? Jesus turned to him, and for the first time, Jonathan saw the weight in his eyes. The kind of weight carried by someone who knows the end, and walks toward it anyway. 33 years, Jesus said softly, because love is not measured in time, but in sacrifice. The words hung in the air. Jonathan felt them cut deep, like they were reaching into places inside him he didn't even know were there. But Jesus wasn't done. I could have lived longer. Could have spoken to more crowds. Healed more sick. Calmed more storms. He paused, eyes glistening in the fading light. But the world didn't need a longer life from me, it needed a perfect love from me. Jonathan felt a lump in his throat. Jesus took a slow breath. And perfect love chooses the cross. Not comfort, not length of days, not safety. The horizon grew darker. Wind stirred the dust at their feet. Jonathan's voice trembled. So, 33 years was enough. Jesus looked at him then. Really looked at him. And in that gaze, Jonathan felt like every doubt, every question, every hidden fear inside him was laid bare. Enough, Jesus whispered, to show the world that love doesn't wait for tomorrow. It gives everything, today. Jonathan blinked hard, his chest tight. Because somehow, he knew this was only the beginning of the answer. The road stretched on before them. And deep down, he knew it would get harder to hear before it got easier. The wind picked up as they walked. A lonely sound through the trees, like the earth itself was listening. Jonathan's steps felt heavier now. He knew the answer wasn't finished. The way Jesus spoke, there was something deeper he hadn't said yet. Finally, Jonathan found his voice. But why so soon? People would have listened, wouldn't they? If you'd stayed longer. Jesus didn't look at him right away. His eyes stayed on the path ahead, where shadows were beginning to stretch long and thin. Jonathan, he said softly, do you remember Lazarus? Jonathan nodded slowly. You raised him, he said. Brought him back after 4 days in the tomb. A faint smile touched Jesus' lips. Yes, but even Lazarus died again one day. The words cut sharper than Jonathan expected. Miracles can move hearts, Jesus continued, but they cannot keep a soul alive forever. Not without the cross. Not without what had to be done. Jonathan's chest tightened. So the cross, it was always the plan. Jesus stopped walking, turned to face him fully now. The cross, he said, voice low but steady, was the reason I was born. Jonathan felt the weight of it hit him like a wave. This man, this God, came knowing every nail, every thorn, every betrayal that waited for him. And still, he came. Jesus looked toward the hills in the distance, the fading sunlight turning his face half gold, half shadow. 33 years, he murmured, almost to himself. Enough to laugh with friends. Enough to eat at weddings. Enough to feel the sun, to taste the dust of this earth, to be one of you. Jonathan's throat felt dry. And enough, to suffer. Jesus turned back, eyes glimmering. Enough, he said, voice catching faintly, to feel every kind of pain you would ever feel. Hunger, loneliness, betrayal, the sting of death itself. Jonathan swallowed hard. But, why? You're God. You could have stopped it. The wind fell still. Jesus stepped closer, and Jonathan could see something in his face now. Not just sorrow, not just strength, but love, raw, burning love. Because, Jonathan, he said softly, I wanted you to know I understand. The words froze Jonathan where he stood. Jesus' gaze didn't waver. When your heart breaks, he whispered, I know how it feels. When you lose someone you love, I have been there. When you wonder if God has abandoned you, I have felt the silence of heaven too. Jonathan's chest ached as though those words had reached into the deepest part of him. Jesus looked away then, toward the darkening sky. The world thinks power means avoiding pain, he said. But love, real love, steps into it, bears it, carries it, for others. Jonathan felt his eyes sting. It was like Jesus was peeling back a curtain, showing him a side of God no one had ever explained like this before. So 33 years, Jonathan whispered, because it was enough to love fully. Enough to suffer fully. Jesus nodded once, slowly. Enough, he said, to give the world a savior who truly knows what it means to be human. The road narrowed as they walked on, stones crunching under their feet. Jonathan could feel it now, the story wasn't over. Because somewhere ahead, beyond the hills, beyond the coming night, was the answer that would break him completely. Night had fallen by the time they reached the edge of the valley. The air was cooler now, sharp with the smell of earth and pine. Jonathan felt the question burning inside him. He had to ask. It was too heavy to carry any longer. Jesus, he said quietly, was it worth it? The words trembled out of him like a confession. All the suffering, all the rejection, the cross, the short life. For the first time, Jesus didn't answer right away. He just stood there, looking out at the horizon, where the last streaks of light were fading. Finally, he spoke. Do you know the hardest moment of my life, Jonathan? Jonathan shook his head slowly. It wasn't the nails, Jesus whispered. Not the crown of thorns. Not even the betrayal of friends. Jonathan's breath caught. Then, what was it? Jesus turned toward him, eyes glimmering in the dark. It was the silence, he said softly. On that cross, when I cried out to the Father and heaven didn't answer. When it felt like even God had turned his face away. Jonathan felt his chest ache. He remembered those words from Scripture. My God, why have you forsaken me? And suddenly, it hit him. Jesus knew abandonment. He knew what it felt like when prayers seemed to fall into emptiness. When the world went dark, and God felt far away. Jonathan's voice cracked. You felt that for us. Jesus nodded. So that when you feel it, you'd know you're not alone. The wind stirred again, cold against Jonathan's face. He blinked hard, trying to keep his voice steady. Is that why you only lived 33 years? He asked. So you could feel everything, even the silence. Jesus' face softened, but his words cut deep. I could have lived longer, he said. I could have grown old, seen grandchildren, died in peace. Jonathan swallowed, waiting. But love, Jesus continued, isn't measured in years. It's measured in sacrifice. The sentence lingered like smoke in the night air. Jonathan looked down, his throat tightening. All this time, he whispered, I thought you came just to teach us how to live. Jesus shook his head slowly. I came, he said, voice breaking just enough to hear it, to teach you how to die, and rise again. Jonathan felt something crumble inside him. The weight of it all, the suffering, the cross, the love behind every moment, was too much. Tears burned in his eyes before he could stop them. Jesus stepped closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. 33 years, he said softly. That's all it took to show the world the heart of God. Jonathan nodded slowly, but his voice was a whisper now. And the heart of God breaks. Jesus' eyes glimmered in the dim light. For you, he said simply. Always for you. Jonathan felt the words pierce deep, cutting through every wall he didn't even know he had. For the first time that night, he couldn't speak at all. They walked in silence for a long time. The stars had come out, countless and cold, stretching across the night sky like promises too far to reach. Jonathan felt small beneath them, smaller than he ever had in his life. But he wasn't afraid, not anymore. Finally, he spoke. His voice was raw. 33 years, and then it was over. Jesus didn't look at him, just kept walking slowly, eyes on the path ahead. Over, he said it softly, like the word itself was fragile. No, Jonathan, that was only the beginning. Jonathan frowned. How can you call it a beginning when it ended? With so much pain. Jesus stopped, turned to him fully. His face was calm, but his eyes carried something infinite, like they'd seen the other side of history. Because life, Jesus said, isn't about length. It's about love. And love doesn't die, it rises. Jonathan felt something inside him unravel. The grief, the confusion, the weight he hadn't even realized he was carrying. He whispered, almost to himself, so 33 years was enough to change everything. Jesus stepped closer, resting a hand lightly against his shoulder. Enough to break heaven open, he said. Enough to show the world what the Father's heart really looks like. Jonathan swallowed hard. His voice shook when he spoke again. But why so young? Why not stay longer? Teach more, heal more. Jesus smiled softly, but there was sadness in it. Because sometimes, he said, the greatest truths are told in the shortest stories. Jonathan froze. That sentence went straight through him. Jesus' voice lowered. 33 years. That was the story. Love, sacrifice, death, and resurrection. That's all it took. The night was silent again except for the wind moving through the trees. Jonathan nodded slowly, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. He didn't bother to hide them. I think I understand now, he whispered. Jesus' hand squeezed his shoulder gently. One day, he said softly, you'll see the whole picture. And when you do, every tear will make sense. Jonathan looked up at the stars, his heart heavy but lighter somehow. And for the first time in his life, he didn't just believe the story. He felt it. As they stood there under the endless sky, Jonathan realized something. 33 years. That was all it took to change the world. And his own heart forever.